10 other villagers live with me on this island, and yet none of them seem to actually contribute to building it into the thriving film studio that it's supposed to be. It is about time I involved them and assigned them their different roles and jobs. When I first acquired this island a few months ago, it was unsurprisingly a mess. Uncoordinated trees everywhere, no streets to guide your way, weeds growing as far as the eye can reach, and my bank account and storage? Pretty tragic, let alone any sort of corporate identity. Thanks to my excellent networking skills though, this wouldn't be the case for long, as Framework Studios received a large, anonymous donation that I quickly invested in some serious infrastructural changes as well as way too much inventory. Luckily in this universe, I seem to be an incredibly strong and talented ball hand wielding persona, so I not only designed the logo and therefore all merchandise myself, but also laid all the streets with my own two, well, balls, I guess. I set up a parking lot with a security booth and some fence all around it right at the start of the island to keep an eye on anyone wanting to enter. You can't be too careful these days. And then once you've made your way into the studio, the first two buildings you stumble upon are Soundstage 1 and 2. Further following the street will then get you to the headquarters office, which is where my humble self resides, as well as our HR office where we conduct all auditions. Further down the street, you will then encounter another branch of the headquarters that Tom Nook insisted on, alongside the interview panel that is used for promotional purposes. If you turn the other way instead, you will find the hair and makeup department alongside costume design right across the bridge with its very own clothing workshop, aka Dang Able Sisters, which doesn't fit the brand colors. And then we can continue and also end our tour update with the food and art styling. These buildings, however, are still entirely empty on the inside, or a completely questionable interior that needs to be changed as quickly as possible if we want to be taken seriously in the industry. And also, if anyone counted along, only 6 out of the overall 10 villagers have even found their location at all. So my to-do list for the day is quite a long one. The strolling around and doing nothing needs to stop today. So let me roll up my sleeves. This is awkward. I may have found something that I in fact cannot do. So let me keep my sleeves where they are and let's get started. The first villager I will have a chat with today is Marshall. He's located within Soundstage 1, right behind the parking lot to the left. As one of our 3 employed directors, I'm imagining a somewhat generic and versatile soundstage for him with a green screen, director's chair, and perhaps a little snack setup on the side. So the first thing I did was create said green screen to spread it out on both the wall as well as floor. Towards the door, I transformed the wall into a concrete one though, and to keep a balance between in front of and behind the camera, I then used the dark wooden flooring tiles and spread those out in the front half of the room. The decorations for the set itself I kept pretty simplistic with a construction scaffolding before moving on to the camera setup along with lights and a TV and director's chair to watch the scenes back. And then as promised, I brought a snack setup to the front left to which I added some fruits, sandwiches, and cupcakes. That is a good balance, I would say. Some more lights for the ceiling, a screen to keep track of the script, a sign for the soundstage, and even more lights and details for the walls. And there we go. Marshall and Soundstage 1. Soundstage 2 is actually a bigger and combined one between Marlowe and Hamfrey, and it's located right beside the first one. We'll get started with Marlowe, our star producer and director. For him, I would like to actually recreate this Regency study from Bridgerton with the film set aka technology twist. A hardwood floor alongside some fancy wallpaper combination already sets that perfect vibe here. I will use the antique console table for the main desk with the Turkey Day garden stands in the background to create that symmetrical vase setup. I will also bring in these white pillars and then some more elegant furniture to round out the Regency part. And then let's bring in some of that filming equipment. The camera and director's chair, which will go in the corner, lots of tech details and lights. And I will also bring in that soundstage sign again, this time for stage 2 though. And now we'll finish it up with the details. The promised vases, as well as some plants, the writer set on the desk with some fancy tea on the side, and then some more scripts, cables, and lights. And voila, Marlowe's film set a la Bridgerton. Now Hamfrey, being Marlowe's apprentice, will get a bit more of a laid-back vibe. Some of you also commented that these sound stages can have somewhat of a storage vibe, so that is exactly what we'll do here. We've got construction scaffoldings, different cameras, some pillars, and of course lots of lights. And I will also use some decorative plants and these hanger racks for different props. Some other items I think would work well on a film set are the different standees, so I also added in the mountain, hedge, and grass. I brought in a little bit more clutter as well with some boxes and some more technical equipment. I especially love this on-air sign. And then I finalized the soundstage with some more lights on the ceiling and walls and that soundstage sign as well. And thus the final, somewhat messy product. Moving on from the sound stages, this next part some might refer to as the most essential, the department that keeps the ball rolling and everyone in business. But of course, what do I know? Located a bit further down the road from the sound stages, the Framework headquarters are made up of my own house as well as Tasha's, since she's my right hand. Do we think that she could roll up her sleeves? Tasha is mostly in charge of talent hire as well as any HR related topics. I wanted to make her space perfect for auditions. One part will be for interviews and the others for taping the actors. This interior needs to be kept very professional looking, of course, so I chose to go with the black brick wall and hardwood flooring and then made sure to bring in an interview setup with the table and chairs. The space for videotapes would be on the other side of the room respectively. To separate this space from the other side, I used glow-in-the-dark stickers with a white design to mimic a white wallpaper and added a black wooden rug in this corner, and then also used those white pillars to completely section the space off. Some more office related things I added to the interview side included a printer, a little file cabinet, some boxes, and even this water cooler. And then with some more chairs to the side and a big professional sign above the table, I moved on to some more wall clutter that I would end up adding to pretty much every interior, by the way. And soon enough, the interview and audition office is ready to go. As for the main headquarters building, we of course have some different rooms to work with. We'll get started with the main entrance hall. This will be transferred into a type of reception with references to our studio so that we can give off a professional vibe to any visitors. I already had some decent flooring and wallpaper down, so I moved right along to the main reception desk in the center of the room. After adding some plants here, I prepared 2 branding displays in the back. On the right-hand side, we display the film projector that you can see displayed outside as well, and towards the left, we'll add in some movie posters. To make it feel even more official, I also decided to install these rope partitions. I brought in a sofa and some chairs to keep our visitors comfy, and also added a water cooler and some magazines. If you've seen other parts of the studio, you might know that I love showing off our logo, so of course I did the very same thing here again, using these canvases on the wall. I added some spotlights to the movie posters, installed some air conditioning, and displayed these famous screenplay bits towards the front. A few more details and another sign above the reception counter, and we're ready to receive visitors. I obviously also need a space of my own to conduct any important meetings, all in the style of an impressive office with a nice backdrop, of course. I chose some decadent hardwood flooring and this black hallway wall just behind where my desk would be. For this one, I also chose to go with a completely black setup to keep it all quite serious looking, and then brought in some white dressers and a tall file cabinet towards the back, and of course, I had to give myself some office plants. I also hung up some more of those logo canvases in the back and then added another film projector right in the center. At this point, the setup was just missing some more chairs for visitors, and then I also brought in a printer and water cooler to the side. With a bunch of files and details all around the room, I then moved on to wall decor, for which I hung up yet another framed screenplay and this big TV opposite of my chair. And then finally, with a big rug, the office is good to go as well. The room to the right-hand side will be transformed into a space for our writers to brainstorm and come up with our captivating screenplays. So I'm thinking we'll need a big table with tons of documents. I'll get started with some carpeted floor and then this operating room wall, which will serve as the brainstorming space. I'll bring in some whiteboards so that the writers can brainstorm different characters and timelines, and then put up the big table and office chair setup right in the center. Across the table, I distributed a mixture of different files and papers as well as technology, and then added lots and lots of sticky notes to the focused wall. Now that looks like a writer's room. And then because brains of course need to be fueled, I decided to give them a little coffee machine setup in the corner as well. And then for final touches, I also installed some lights and air conditioning and added more framed scripts and of course branding onto the wall. I can already feel the nominations rolling in. With the space for our writers done, I also think that we should have a space for our actors to do a table read. So once again, I'm thinking a big table in the center with lots of documents, and then for this one, I think we should also bring in some snacks. I'll use this artsy carpeted floor and those brick walls that are pretty much a staple at this point, and then first and foremost focus on the big table. For this one, I ended up combining 3 big 2x2 tables with a total of 14 chairs around it. I decided to go for some more fancy looking ones here. Oh, Oh, and did you spot the branding? I can't help myself. And then along that back wall, I started putting up a long buffet for all kinds of different snacks and refreshments. We've got some different drink options with coffee, tea, infused water, and more. And as for snacks, there's a pretty good selection ranging from fruit to pretzels and cupcakes. And we even got some cookies and chips right here in the center, in between all of these scripts, paperwork, and technology. As for the walls, I had brought in another TV and then hung up some autographs and framed screenplays, and also once again installed some air conditioning. Oh, and yes, I also fixed this chair. All right, we are ready for our first table read. Lots of these rooms have been focused on anything leading up to filming, but I would also like to have an office for post-production work as well. And when I looked this up, lots of them seem to have a big screen and then a wide table with lots of buttons and levers and stuff that I of course know exactly what to do with. And I think I would also like to have some general office vibes on the other side as well. Since this is quite a big space, we'll tackle it in more or less two sections. First up is the big screen to watch back the movies and shows, which I achieved by using glow-in-the-dark stickers with a black design. And then I used more of those reception counters to act as our big desk. I brought in pedal boards and a sampler, as well as another screen and of course some chairs, which I think already looks pretty professional. And then to round this out, I gave them a cabinet with some headphones and some more boxes, and brought in the sofa just in front of the table for whenever executives might want to review the footage. After installing some floor monitors and even more ceiling mounted screens, and once again some air conditioning, let's focus on the office side. I had been able to put up this window panel wall, which I think is absolutely perfect here, and then focused on two different table setups. One that's a bit more editing focused with these multi-monitor setups, and one that's a little bit more paperwork focused. And then, of course, full-on office vibes. We've got file cabinets, a printer and water cooler, and of course, we cannot forget the office plants. Some more lights on the ceiling, and one more room is fully done. To keep this entire this entire film set running, I think that I should also add a server room to the back of the house. And honestly, the inspo isn't much for this one. It's just servers, I guess. I even took this one to the next level using the server room wall as well, and then I just spread a few servers across the room so that you can still walk in between them and access it all for maintenance. I brought in some air conditioning and a surveillance camera, and that was basically it. Later on, I actually realized that I would need to place a bed somewhere in this house if I wanted to share the dream of framework at some point, though I actually ended up adding this cardboard bed here in the server room. That's just gonna be like an important delivery, right? Is that considered a fire hazard? With the headquarters now up and running, we've got all the contracts and paperwork secured, and it's time to take a step further towards actually filming. Because we're getting closer and closer to having actors on set, we'll desperately need to get our hair and makeup department up to code. The outside, as shown earlier, is luckily already put together with even a trailer waiting to be moved around set. And speaking of, that will act as our inspo for Agnes' interior. So we will have a couple of different makeup stations along the wall, and then perhaps a little area for her to plan the looks as well. We'll once again start with some carpeted flooring and then spread some of these vanities all across the right-hand side. The gaps in between I decided to fill in using the tension pole rack so that we've got some decent shelving to work with. And speaking of, I even installed some more iron wall racks here to create an entire wall of shelves. I added on some cool chairs and gave the space a plant for good measure before placing this counter table below the window for an extra surface. And now time for some details. We gotta add some makeup pouches, of course, and I also placed some jewelry and tissues as well. One of these setups got a little coffee cup on the side, and then I hung up some hair accessories right by this shelf. For Agnes' little inspo setup, I built her this corner table to the front left, and then placed a tablet, magazine, and scrapbook ready for her to use. We'll pretend this first aid kit is actually filled with beauty products, and make sure to place the scripts over to the right if anyone still needs to learn their lines. And then also time to display some of those wigs that Agnes had worked on the empty surfaces. The ceiling lights and wall spotlights also came in quite handy to make this a more illuminated space, and then with some more sketches on the wall as well as a display of different hats and glasses, this is the finished space. We're prepared to get the actress camera ready. And with hair and makeup now secured, you know what's coming next, don't you? We hired John as our head of costume design and already put together the structure with his own workshop. Now all that's left to do is furnish the interiors. And after we did lots and lots of planning, I will actually let John handle this one as he knows best what he needs. The most important room, the heart of the operation, would be the dressmaking and tailoring office located upstairs. John would need a decently sized workspace along with different dresses and outfits that they're working on, some fabric storage, and then also a part to plan and brainstorm all the costumes. Here on Framework, the dressmaking is mostly focused on elaborate gowns and suits, as other more modern clothing can more easily be purchased. We'll use some hardwood flooring and brick wall along some concrete wall in the back to give the space a sort of modern but raw workspace vibe. The little office part will be towards the left with some typical office desks, and as for the workspace itself, we'll have these two table setups. Some clothing organizers and a dresser will provide decent storage space for any needed materials, and then we'll go right ahead and start displaying some of the gowns and garments. Unsurprisingly, we'll continue the Regency theme here as well and display a few Bridgerton-inspired options along the right-hand side. We'll also provide a bunch of these stools that can then easily be moved around as they're working, and also add on any and all tools and details they need. Some yarn and wool, as well as sewing machines and kits. And of course, this won't focus solely on the actual dresses, but also other parts needed, such as shoes or even stockings later on. For inspiration as they work on the different concepts, we also added some magazines and reference sheets with color swatches and notes. The office vibe was then completed with a printer and some plans, and also some logo canvases on the wall. Feels like forever since I've displayed one of these. Oh, and speaking of the wall, we also pinned up tons of sticky notes once again for any of the ongoing pieces all across the room. And then time to display some more dresses. Some of them with a more regal vibe, as well as a couple of maid costumes, and we even utilized the wall to display some coats as well as stockings across the front and right hand side. And then we also added 2 more dresses right behind the office desks. This space is good to go. Once the dresses are then made, we of course need to make sure that they work for the actors as well, so the room to the left will be used for fittings. We'll need some mirrors, lots of lights, and maybe also a white wall to take some pictures of the outfits. We'll use the exact same wallpaper setup as upstairs with the brick and concrete, and then to create a mirror wall towards the back, we'll utilize the simple panels with a mirror design. Somewhere in the center, they'll be separated by this pillar though, so that we can put up some curtain partitions and create a changing room in that corner. We'll also bring in a little fluffy rug and a stool here before moving on to the opposite corner of the room. This one, like we did at Tasha's place, will be made to look like it has white wallpaper using the glow-in-the-dark stickers, so that it acts as a blank canvas when taking pictures during the fittings. We'll make sure the space is sufficiently illuminated with some ceiling lights, and then bring in the needed camera and another stage light for good measure. Towards the front bit, we also decided to add on a sofa with some snacks, and then we brought in a few of the dresses as though they need to be tried on. One goes right by the mirrors, and then 2 others will be hung up inside the changing room. Add on some stockings, some boxes to the other side, and this back towards the entrance, and there we go. With all of these beautiful dresses and outfits completed, John will also require a space to store all of these, so naturally the room to the right will be transformed into a clothing storage of sorts. We'll need tons of boxes, wardrobes, clothing racks, and so on. This time we entirely opted to go for a concrete vibe to keep this quite raw looking, and then went right ahead to focus on the storage items. We got some big black dressers towards the back left corner, then this clothing rack and closet right next to them. We'll add some portable hanger racks all around the room, along with this table in the center to store some smaller things, and then bring these plastic clothing organizers to the front right. Another lower table was placed by the entrance as well, and then it was time for box core. We've got some rolling cards to the front and back, lots of different shoe boxes all across the room, this little black box and the sewing box, and of course tons of other little details like piles of clothing, this jar of wool, and some different shoes. The wall we then used to display some different hats in the back left corner as well as against the wall in the front. With some lights up in the center of the room, we lastly decided to lay down some black carpet. And then the storage room is set up and ready. Something else John asked for is a laundry room, which we will add on to the back. This will be a place to wash and dry the different garments, and also will be sure to add an ironing setup as well. With some white wallpaper and flooring to transport the more clean vibes, I first went and installed our washing machines. I actually got this idea to layer the counter tables and machines from Pinterest because it provides an awesome opportunity to add all those bottles alongside the wall as well. We additionally added on some shelving to the right and some wall racks towards the left. That way, the center created a perfect spot for some more more sticky notes. Maybe some washing instructions or something like that. We also wanted to add a little ironing station here, so I brought in a table towards the right, along with a hanger rack, and also placed a drying rack towards the front. Otherwise, tons of little details we needed to truly bring this room together. So we included some different cushions or maybe stacks of fabric, a little basket, and bottles of fabric softener, as well as some laundry detergent. Then the ironing board was set up alongside some folded clothing, and for good measure, we added another ironing board to the left as well. With some more clothing items down, I spotted another great opportunity for some branding, and after installing a ceiling fan, the laundry room was also good to go. And then last but not least, we've got the main room. This one we decided to use for any final fittings right before the garments are ready to go out. So we'll need another fitting room, and then I'm thinking even more boxcore vibes to go along with it. We decided to use the hardwood floor here to create a bit of a friendly atmosphere upon entering, but still kept the workspace vibe with the concrete and black brick wall. The promised fitting room would go to the back left corner, once again using the curtain partitions and some pillars. Over to the right hand side, we then decided to set up some more plastic clothing organizers alongside the first few boxes, and we also brought in a sofa here similar to the fitting room. Additional seating was also provided towards the front before basically all the rest of the space would be available for boxes. We added some more dressers and a hanger rack to break it up some more, and then included just a few more details and snacks on the available surfaces. For the ceiling, we installed one of those framework signs and then brought in a framed poster, some shelving, and more branding to decorate the walls. And with some fresh flowers added to the table here, this concludes John's house, aka the costume department. We've got headquarters to run this place. Actors will be sure to look their absolute best, and the sound stages are prepped and ready to go as well. So now it's time to focus on some filming props. I'll go ahead and talk to Fleury, who's in charge of food styling here on Framework. I'd like to give her a sort of industrial kitchen style with multiple fridges and decent space to work on her creations, such as a big table setup, and, of course, lots of cakes. I first got started laying down some kitchen tile as well as putting up our beloved black brick wall. And before I get lost in the details here, I do have to make sure that she gets a functioning kitchen. I'll bring in this big system kitchen and then install those promised fridges, and she will of course need a stove and oven as well. With these range hoods installed above, at least she'd have some functioning equipment. So now let's move on to the workspace. I'll once again make use of these black tables toward the right hand side, and I will also start bringing in some of the kitchen utensils alongside. A pot, a pan, and, very important, a stand mixer. I also added some stools for her to work a bit more comfortably, and then this space is all about storage as well, with some flour bags and bottle crates across the space. And now, time to add those beautiful and delicious creations. We've got some impressive 3-tiered cakes, this afternoon tea set, some fruit cupcakes and a Yule log, as well as some more cooking tools. And at this point, I had already run out of surface space, so added another setup to the front left for her that was then soon covered with more sweet treats, bread, a tea set, and a kitchen scale. We hung up the set of knives for her, and because cleanliness is very important in the food industry, there's also a broom and dustpan. Apart from that, Fleury requested a little space to pin up her recipes as well as sticky notes, which I added to the front, and with a few more details on the walls and some lights installed, Fleury is ready to start prepping. Not ready are the 4 remaining houses, since the food styling was the last house that had been incorporated into the studio's infrastructure. So before I can plan out some more interior spaces, I should probably take care of that. I had previously decided that all on-set employees would be kept to the front part of the island, and thus had roughly planned out the road outline here so the rest of the houses might fit in. And so of course, the first thing for me to do was to properly install some street. I first started laying down some of the groundwork so we'd see the changes reflected on our map as well, and then also started more specifically planning the other house locations. We'd have 2 right here next to each other with pretty minimal space in between them, and then another one a bit further to the front right. Once these spots felt like they somewhat made sense, I also went back to actually bring in the street design, at least all the way to this corner here for now. At this point, Walker also strolled past, maybe to see if this would finally be his space. I do have to disappoint him though, it's not his turn just yet. I decided to extend the road groundwork and design a little further up. I would need to sooner or later anyway, and at this point at least I have all the tools ready to go. And once I could be sure that these new plots would be connected to the infrastructure, it's time to chat to Nook as well as the employees so that I can move their entire houses. Strong balls and all that, you know?
The first one I decided to chat with here was Gonzo. He's joined the framework team not too long ago and will be the one to move into the spot right here. You'll notice it shifted a little bit forward from the initial intended spot, and the reason behind that is basically being able to plant a tree. What else could it be? At this point, I think I have two passions: trees and branding. With this one squared away, I think maybe Walker might be feeling a little left out at this point. But don't worry, I've got plans for you as well. You are not the one that I want to move out. Anyway, with Gonzo's house squared away, the next one I will have a chat with is Zell, as he will be the one moving in next to Gonzo, right here. And then that third open plot, I will have to hand over to Diva for now. However, due to our very limited budget for salaries and someone very specific in mind that I want to hire, she actually needs to leave. Only, I can't outright tell her this or let my true feelings be known here, because that could get me in trouble with HR. So I just kind of went over there for a casual chat, you know, to try and see if there were like any openings, anything where I could like give her the needed nudge, you know? And she did actually end up talking about her mom and how nostalgic she's recently been. I can definitely work with that, in everyone's best interest, of course. Over the next couple of days, I then made sure to always keep an eye out for any other burst of nostalgia and any deep-rooted thoughts of home. She seemed quite unbothered though, casually strolling around in the plaza and then in front of her newly moved house, which by the way does not fit the brand colors, and I know technically Gonzo's doesn't either, but that's neither here nor there. Diva was so casual and unbothered, in fact, I kind of started getting worried that she might never free up her spot until finally, in the pouring rain, there she was thinking, I wish you all the best. May you find your calling just like anywhere else. Soon, this spot would be free. Catching up with Tasha, she also let me know that she had already been prepping everything for the new arrival. So all I had to do, once I said a final goodbye to Diva, of course, was let our new employee know about joining Framework. I'm pleased to announce we'll be adding Bones to the film studio. Welcome to the team. And so, with Bones having joined this lineup and finalizing our employee list, it was time for these three houses to get the Framework makeover. Once again, let's go ahead and start with Gonzo. For him, I decided to go with this clean stucco exterior along with a gray roof and white door. For Zell, I then decided to go with a white and gray cobblestone siding with a dark roof and white door. And our newest arrival got somewhat of a mirror version of this with the black siding and white roof, as well as a white door and flower wreath. Now this feels a lot more like Framework Studios, doesn't it? Oh wait, actually, I will also need to install some stone flooring around their house, then it'll feel like Framework Studios. And thus, with these three having found their respective spots in the studio and being more or less incorporated, let's chat about their jobs and interiors. Gonzo was recently hired as Framework's very own dance instructor, so naturally his interior needs to reflect a space for the actors to practice for their upcoming choreographies. We'll need lots of mirrors and a sort of railing, as is typical for this kind of studio, and then maybe some refreshments and other details to keep it interesting. I chose to go with some hardwood flooring, and then once again the black brick wall and the concrete wall towards the back so that we can install mirrors here in basically the same way we had done for John. As promised, once the mirrors were standing, I also added the railing bars, and of course, we have to have some music here as well. I brought in some benches along the front and side for people to rest on in between dancing, and then just added some towels and this mop to keep the space clean and dry. I also placed some dance shoes and installed some proper lighting above the mirrors, and with some sticky notes and air conditioning here as well. This is Gonzo's dance studio, and we can move on to the next department. Zell will work as our sound designer here at Framework Studios, so we will need to give him one of those buttons and levers setup that I fully know how to operate, as well as lots of instruments and maybe a little recording booth as well. We'll need to constantly keep the soundproofing in mind here, so we'll go with some carpeted flooring and this perforated board wall. To let in some natural light, the side wall will be a brick one though. First up, I made sure to bring in the big workspace desk, once again using the reception counters. And then for this one, I'd also found this awesome inspo on Pinterest that gave me an idea on how to do the recording booth. Using some pillars and counters, I was able to section this little space off, and then with the mic placed inside, that already looks pretty great. We'll get back to this in a second, but first, let's get the workspace set up. I will also bring in a DJ turntable and synthesizer and install those promised buttons and levers for the desk. That's pretty professional looking. I also added this on-air sign on the counter and made sure to bring in some effects racks. Towards the back right, I decided to create a little storage space for any extra instruments and equipment. So now we have a little selection of different guitars and generally some more surface space to work with. The lights I installed in the booth also helped increase that official recording booth feeling. And then I added in a few more details such as more buttons and levers, some headphones, boxes, and some more wall-mounted equipment as well. I also hung up some autographs towards the front and then framed these famous music pieces to hang up inside the booth. And then with this floor monitor and amp, we've got yet another space complete. Bones, as you all know, is our newest hire, and he will be our Foley artist, which means he will need tons and tons of different things to work with. I'm thinking like different floor options and different shoes, boxes with lots of random stuff, and like a general storage vibe. And of course, a setup with a TV and microphone in the center. We'll actually focus on some of that flooring first. I want to make sure that he has as many different sounding options here as possible. So after a general dirt flooring was installed, I also laid out some carpet, different stone options, as well as this aluminum rug. And since I wanted a bit of a storage space in this house, I actually decided to put up an extra wall and then chose a very similar setup to Zell regarding the wallpaper. I got another different sounding carpet installed and then made sure to use some wooden floor for the storage, as well as add on a hardwood floor option on the other side as well. I added that TV in the center and some shelving for the right hand side, as well as the promised microphone setup. And from here, we'd need lots of different surfaces and, dare I say, random things with the promise of making a useful sound. A bucket full of water, some kitchen tools, bottles, and a jar full of coffee grounds. And then I also added a bunch of different shoes to the wall for maximum footstep sound variety. We've got a plant, some fruit, a box full of tools, and multiple bottles filled with different liquids, and even some firewood. And with some lights, sticky notes, and some more kitchen tools on the wall, we have yet another completed and pretty messy workspace, at least on the inside. Now it's time to reflect all this on the outside as well. The first thing I would have to do here is dust off my design skills in order to create a brand new sign for the dance studio so it's easy to find. And then I made use of my hard-earned inventory to bring some other items into the mix. I added this backwards file cabinet to create some basic surface space and then decided to take inspiration from previous structures that I'd built, in this case Tasha. So I also brought in that little steel fence and some more tanks, aka water towers, right behind and next to the dance studio. But of course not without branding. I also decided the cedar tree was stealing the show just a little bit too much, so I just went ahead and uprooted the entire thing to plant a new and smaller one in its place. The fully grown one I just carried back here like it was nothing, and then also added on a new hardwood tree here as well. For Zell, I took some inspiration from Agnes Place and brought in some more greenery, and then used another one of my beloved effects racks before I had the idea of sectioning this area off with some black and white fence towards the back. And then this department would of course also require a sign. This time it's for sound design and Foley. Not really loving the way this looks though when you're running directly towards it, so I went ahead and shifted it over to Bones Place. I moved those black and white fences that I'd placed before much closer to the houses so they would basically be adjacent, and then no one is truly surprised if I tell you that every single one of those pieces got the logo slapped on, right? With the row of fences in place and a tree planted at that street corner, I also decided to whip out my road making expertise once again to shift this planned sidewalk a little bit closer to the houses. As much as I love trees, we wouldn't need this much space for nature. And while I'm on it, let's keep the ball rolling, or the ball's laying path, you know, because my hands. Alright, okay, I may have used this joke enough now. Anyway, let me continue laying the rest of the street part here. You know the drill by now. We've got the sidewalk, the in-game pathing as groundwork, and of course, the street code itself. And then we can focus on the house decorations again. This time, I also added more plants by Bones' house as well, and then brought in this wooden partition behind and the rope partition in front of the dance studio. And because I've liked having these around in the past, I placed a construction scaffolding towards the left as well as behind the houses. Just like I'd promised before, the space behind these would then be used for some trees. I was mostly focused on getting the best possible coverage here. Another trip to my storage, and I also brought in this on-air sign just like I had on the inside of the houses, as well as some boxes. And then because I wanted some more basic surface space, I used another file cabinet here by the side and this plastic organizer behind the scaffolding with the short simple panel to minimize the gaps. That way, I'd even have space for another smaller tree here by the side of the road. I went over to in front of the houses again to swap out a couple of the stone tiles for the vertical piece, and then time to grow in some of those freshly planted trees. On my way back to the area to check on those, I went ahead and picked up some orders from my mailbox, including this caged car that I then tried out in between the houses. Honestly, that felt a little bit too much like a cage though, so I instead moved over the wooden partition that I used behind the dance studio. And this, I ended up liking. I also chose to go for somewhere greenery here in the form of a shrub, and then place this amp just in front. I'd also used these headphones in both interiors before, so I thought it might make sense to bring these back, and this tree right here will also stay exactly like this. All the others will need a little bit more time. Before I grow those, let me just install a few more things though. This record box in front of Zell's place and this rope partition, and the steel fence goes over to Bone's place. And then for the music vibes, let me drop one of these KK pieces here. That's pretty cute. I also still had that caged card with me, which I was then able to use by the dance studio, and then a pocket declutter and refill later. I also installed some meter and pipes behind Zell's house, brought that previously stolen wooden partition back, and created some more surface area with an effects rack. To make this side part transition nicely, I added some trash bags and wheat fields. With enough items down for now, I then made sure to grow a few of these trees. I stunted this hardwood by the beach, the cedar, as well as these two hardwood trees back behind the fence. And then I also went over to that cedar that I'd replanted at the start of this process and decided to slightly extend the stone flooring here, as well as install some fence so that Gonzo can park his car right there. The cedar tree was of course also stunted at this stage, and I used the opportunity to plant a few more new trees here as well. At this point, I decided I would need a little change of pace to focus on the last remaining house. Currently, our last employee Walker is still located at the very back of the island, but I would definitely want to bring him a bit closer, especially seeing as he is our runner. Just on the left of this road, more or less across from Bones, seems like a pretty decent location for that. I had also already planned on this little space in front of it being a little bike parking space, so I made sure to prep out that area by laying down some stone path. Now let me go ahead and talk to Walker, who, not surprisingly at all, is totally on board with the moving. I think he has been ready for this for a while. And then after placing the plot down, I made sure to incorporate it into our lineup by also laying down that stone pathing all around the house. Another brief little decorating detour to deposit a record box, tape deck, and some documents by the dance studio, and then to also bring in this plastic organizer and wooden partition, as well as some greenery in the form of a round topiary on the right hand side. And then ever since I used it for the first time, I have been looking for another opportunity to include this parabolic antenna, which I think in front of this house is quite decent. And then I just added on a mop and some boxes to fill this gap here. I quite like those black and white fences that I'd put up before, so back to Walker's house, I used that same layout and added on another few framing bits such as the meter and pipes and wooden partition. Now let's get that house moved. I realized that I actually forgot to add the branding to the fences, so I ran to fix this grave error before whipping out my pathing tool once again and filling in these gaps in front of the house, adding some sidewalk pieces to the bike parking spot, and then extending the stone floor to the left of the house. I also planted a tree right here and installed some fence by the parking spot before I decided it was time to align Walker's house with Framework's corporate identity a bit more. For this one, I actually wanted a little bit more of a rough industrial look, so I chose this black striped siding with a gray roof and white door. And then once I had communicated these plans to Nook, let me just go ahead and tackle that interior as well. I have been told that runners, or in this case, walkers, I suppose, because, you know, Walker, are absolutely essential on a film studio. They make sure that not only coffee and tea is delivered from A to B, but also important documents and media as well. Most of my inspo for this part actually comes from Bella Does Editing on Instagram, who shared a bit about her day as a runner a while back. I think we'll need another industrial kitchen setup here and lots of boxes and documents, and I see my chance for a workbench. I'll get started with my trusted black brick and concrete combination for the wall and floor, and then bring in that industrial kitchen vibe using the kitchen dishwashers and counter. This might actually be the first time that I've ever used these items. We'll start layering this in the back right and then section this part off using some pillars and tall counters. The left part will then serve as a little workbench corner because, little Animal Crossing knowledge moment, the changes the villagers make to their house to fit their workbench when you see them crafting during the day actually are reflected in the DA. So by incorporating this here, I will then hope that Walker will be the one crafting, aka all those interiors that we worked on so hard today, day actually will look like intended. My only other hope for this is the stove in Flurry's place. To the kitchen side in Walker's house here, I then also added the previously mentioned coffee and tea, as well as some dishes, and provided some cleaning supplies with the mop and vacuum cleaner. I filled all the gaps with a variety of boxes and even scattered these papers on the floor. Oops. And speaking of papers, I used the opportunity to place some more scripts and music pieces here to the front as well. And then last but not least, I installed an intercom and phone and hung up these keys. I hope that this will meet Walker's expectations. Now, let's make sure to head back outside to finish the space. With the newly designed house being ready the next day, I actually decided to quickly check in with Walker and promptly found him napping on the job. I will excuse it this time since his house isn't fully done yet. Back outside, I noticed that I had this leftover branded flag in my inventory, which I promptly deposited over by Zelle's house, and then I went over to also fill this gap in front of the bikes with a few more trees. With all of these having grown as intended, I then gathered some more items and the last bit of my strength and inspiration I could find to work on this last exterior. I would want to continue the sort of cluttered vibes from inside the house, so I tried yet another one of those cage cards on either side of the house and also planted a few more trees around the corner before I decided to craft and then set up this big iron frame on the side. I moved this lower wooden field sign over towards the front by the bike parking space to make room for a slightly taller sign by the house, and then filled this newly open spot here with a utility pole and a tool cart, because it's always good to have tools nearby, and a garbage bin. I also made the decision to actually rest my design skills at this point and just opted for a generic branded sign this time. The fence around the bikes was further extended as well, and then speaking of fence, I sort of didn't know what to do next to this house or how to really end this front/backyard, so I wanted to try some fencing to sort of just cut it off right there. And because I quite liked that, I actually took it a little step further and also used the sidewalk tile here around the edge. Now, in order for Walker to in fact not have to walk everywhere, I am on fire today. I also gave him this electric scooter and then layered some more boxes and trash for good measure. Even after that though, the space still felt somewhat empty to me, so I also installed this manhole cover and then tripped and scattered these papers on the floor. Seeing as I liked them, I just left them there though, and then brought in some more documents and office materials as well as these dishes. I couldn't stop myself from laying down somewhere street and then decided to make sure that all the freshly planted trees are grown. And with that done, it was time to once again pass this over to my off-the-record gardening persona. A big step was taken today towards turning Framework into a functioning film studio. And then coming up next, let's finally work on some exterior film sets. Now, I do have some projects lined up to start filming here soon, but if you have any ideas as to what we should bring to Framework, please do let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching today. Make sure that you're subscribed so that you don't miss any of the important Framework updates, and I will see you next time. Bye everyone!